Like many of you here today, I'm very sad to have lost a friend, my mentor, Governor Stephen Merrill. But I know if Steve were here with us right now, what he would be doing. He would be dishing out the sharp, funny one-liners about everyone here, and we would all be laughing. If Steve had not become a brilliant lawyer and a masterful political leader, he could have easily been a comedian. And the one thing we know about great comedians is that they have deep insight and they understand people. Steve certainly had that gift. He came from humble roots in the Seacoast, and he was very proud to be the first governor who had been a graduate of UNH. He was one of the smartest, the most articulate leaders that I have ever met, and he could make anyone feel comfortable, and he truly made you feel like you mattered when he walked in the room and he spoke with you. Part of his charm, which has already been talked about, is that Merrill smile. That Merrill smile could make anyone feel welcome. I got to know Steve when I served as actually legal counsel to Governor Benson, and then later as Attorney General. Steve had been an excellent Attorney General, what he called the public's lawyer, and I turned to him frequently for advice. He always had something smart and insightful to offer, no matter what your problem was. And one day he shared with me a little bit about when he first became Attorney General. It was really important for him to earn the respect of those line lawyers in the AG's office because he had come from being the legal counsel to Governor Sununu, and he had not worked his way up through the office. So what he did is he came to the Attorney General's office, he did the work, and he led by example. He went to autopsies, he went to murder scenes, and he actually tried cases as Attorney General. And he didn't pick the cases. He let the staff members at the AG's office pick which cases that he would work on. And he would take on and try some of the hardest cases that other people in the office didn't want to deal with. And because of that, he became one of the most respected attorneys general within the office, and frankly, throughout the country. Since his passing, I have gotten literally dozens of emails from attorneys general from across the country, from both sides of the aisle, that knew Steve, people that he helped and made a difference for in so many ways. The word that I keep hearing from them is mentor. And I can relate to that because I was blessed to have Steve as my mentor. In 2009, when Judd Gregg announced that he was retiring, Steve actually got lots of calls asking him to run for Senate. And when he declined, he encouraged me, and he agreed to chair my campaign. From that moment on, I always called him chairman, and he always called me candidate. He even called me that when I saw him last week. Not only was Steve a source of sound advice, but he was unfailingly loyal. When he decided to be for something or someone, you could always count on him. As Attorney General, he fought tirelessly for victims of crime. As the governor, he stood up for taxpayers. And as a friend, he would never let you down. I remember the night of my primary during my first run for office. We were at the Courtyard here, Courtyard Marriott. I see Steve Duper here, who was there as well. We were in a room and we were waiting for the results to come in. And frankly, it wasn't looking too good for me. I was down by thousands of votes, but the votes were coming in slowly. It was past midnight, and Steve and Dave Wibby actually they had left and they were driving back to Manchester. And I was pretty upset, and I said, "Where's Meryl? Where's Meryl?" So Craig Benson got on the phone, he called Steve, and he said, "Kelly's upset, and she is looking for you." Steve turned around, he came back to the Marriott, it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and he stayed for the rest of the night. Steve and Meryl helped me in the tough times, and he wasn't just there when I won, he stood by me when I lost. And that is the definition of a true friend. As I think of all the titles that Steve had, legal counsel, attorney general, governor, chairman, the one that mattered to him most was father. He often talked about Stephen and Ian and how proud he was of both of you. And I'm going to share a story that I know Ian shared. A few years ago, Steve asked Ian to get dressed up and actually come up here to the State House. And they walked around together and talked about his time as governor, and Steve was introducing Ian to people who worked here at the State House. After that experience, Ian came to appreciate so much, because he was a very young child at the time, the enormity and the importance of his father's job as governor. And so the next day, he left his father a message on his phone, and he told him how proud he was of him and how much he loved him. And when Steve passed away, Ian went to look at his father's phone, and there was one voicemail saved on it. It was the voicemail that he had left for his father years earlier after they visited the State House, and it tells you exactly what Steve's priorities were and how much he cared for his family. Despite all of his accomplishments, Steve cared most about his family, about his friends. Heather, Ian, Steve, and Carissa, he loved you so much, and you're going to remain in our prayers. And thank you so much for sharing him with us. I know that's not easy. And Chairman, I just want to tell you that I'm going to miss you so much.